Since humanity first started walking the earth, we've had dominion over every living thing. But humanity has exploited creation in the name of the almighty dollar. Until today, around 1/3 of known life on Earth faces extinction. But there are those who are acting to save endangered species before it's too late.
These coming few years are really critical if we can save orangutans or not. So it's really now or never.
If the mortality, adult mortality, which is estimated at about 2% currently, if that rises by 1%, which is 5 individuals due to the population structure, then that population will become extinct in 2 human generations.
It's hard to say who's to blame for this. People are making money out of it, and that's what has been the driving force behind it.
Without the support of the world and without the financial support of the world, without the financial support of the world, the orangutan is absolutely doomed.
The orangutan, as far as people are concerned, next to the whale and the dolphin, the most popular animal God created. In zoos the world over, they give pleasure to millions. But zoos, of course, do much more than just entertain. They educate by making people aware that extinction is creeping up on thousands of endangered species. They're also at the forefront of caring for animals on an individual level, like arranging open-heart surgery, or a breeding program which led to this birth. Both of which we'll see later. But it's in the wild where the orangutan belongs. The steamy hot jungles of Borneo and Sumatra is their home. Unfortunately, it's at home where they face the greatest danger, where there are forces at work which threaten to wipe them out forever. This rainforest is Indonesia's largest lowland rainforest. It's the Kutai National Park and stretches from the northern hemisphere across the equator to the southern hemisphere. Sounds big, but in actual fact, it's only 200,000 hectares. But it's one of the most important rainforests in the world, as it has one of the highest levels of biodiversity in the world. It is the home to around 200 species of birds and about 800 species of animals, including the critically endangered orangutan. 4,000 years ago, there were more orangutans living in Southeast Asia than people. Experts estimate around 10 million. These fruit eaters populated most of Asia, ranging from South China across to India. Two 2,000 years ago, they still outnumbered humans, around 3 million orangutans. Today, there are only two populations left, on the islands of Sumatra and Borneo. The rush of progress and human greed has resulted in the orangutans slipping into a dangerous decline. There are no accurate figures to indicate just how many of these magnificent creatures are left in the wild, though experts believe there could be as few as 10,000.
Now, at this moment, they're critically endangered, yes. And that is because of fragmentation, as we call it. A lot of big populations have now been broken up into very small units. A lot of orangutans are desperately running around because they can't find food anymore.
Herman Rijkson is scientific advisor to an organization which, since the 60s, has been trying to save the orangutan.
People thought that there were only 4,000 orangutans left in the world. That was in the late 1960s. And it made such a stir in the Western world, as a matter of fact, that the International Union for the Conservation of Nature decided to put the orangutan on its red list, which means that it's endangered and that everybody is fearing that it's going extinct very quickly.
Once upon a time, this entire island was covered in primary rainforest. But logging and mining has taken its toll. Not only on the forest, but the creatures that live here. This orangutan is a long way from home. She's another victim of what we call progress. A mining company wanted her forest, so they moved her out. She hasn't adjusted to her new surroundings at all well, and in desperation has come to this camp for food. This situation is just one of the problems which Australian vet Chris Warren deals with. Chris is in charge of animal welfare at Indonesia's largest orangutan rehabilitation centre on the island of Kalimantan. Kalimantan is the world's third biggest island. It was once home to millions of orangutan. Today, there are less than a few thousand left.
Yeah, we receive orangutans from all over Kalimantan. Not only in Kalimantan, but now there's a registered list of confiscated orangutans from Java, from other parts of Indonesia as well. We've received them from Manado, Bali, also from outside of Indonesia to other places that they've been smuggled, such as Taiwan.
One reset was set up by the Indonesian government to help deal with the decimation of the orangutan. Here, rescued orangutans are housed in large cages before being released back into the wild.
The orangutan project itself started when I came across a dying baby orangutan at the marketplace in Balikpapan. It was just appalling. So at night I came back, I took that little baby orangutan, so I got stuck with an illegally kept orangutan. First I thought I might end up with something like 7 orangutans. But once we started in the first year, already more than 20 orangutans showed up from just Samarinda and Balikpapan, and it became clear that the project was going to be a completely different scale.
The animal he is talking about was an orphan. His mother had been killed by poachers who wanted to kidnap the baby to sell it. The horrifying story is the same for all of these young orangutans. They are all orphaned, their mothers victims of the poachers' guns.
Usually, the process in order to obtain a baby to sell on the black market is to kill the mother. which involves often a rather brutal slaughter. Usually the mother's shot, often the baby's killed in the process. It's estimated only 1 in 3 survive.
Against the odds, they do survive, and the fortunate ones end up here before being rehabilitated and released back into the jungle.
The stress of this upon a youngster, like Constance here, is great, and very few actually survive.
Today, there are more than 100 baby and juvenile orangutan orphans being rehabilitated at One Reset. These young orangutans have been quarantined, but today they have been given a clean bill of health and a bath before joining the other youngsters. This little guy may not much like having a bath, but compared to his previous life, he doesn't know how lucky he is. But these are the real lucky ones. This mother and baby have had little or no human contact. They live deep in the Kutai National Park rainforest. But they are under threat. What is left of the lowland forest is surrounded either by logging, mining, or spreading rural development. These animals are literally just hanging on to survival. But there is a major plan to protect them and help keep them safe. The nagging question is, have we left it too late? It's no easy task finding wild orangutans, even if you know where to look. The One Reset Rehabilitation Centre is at the southern end of Kalimantan. To observe wild orangutans, Chris Warren has to travel for 2 days across the equator to the northern hemisphere, then trek for hours into the rainforest. These creatures are past masters at making themselves invisible.
The orangutan is actually quite solitary as a species. There's much debate that abounds this very issue, especially in the captive world. But when you look in the wild at the natural social structure, much research done in the past has provided evidence that adult males are usually solitary, except when they come to find females for breeding over a short period of time, and they move off again.
It has been said from the very beginning that orangutans are solitary. Basically, I think because people never found more than 1 or 2 in the forest. They're very elusive. The orangutan is the kind of character that bears in itself wildness, bears in itself individuality, bears in itself some spirit that I love and I like so much. If you see other animals, they're either beautiful, awesome, or whatever. Orangutans, for me, are the representative of wildness, of a wild spirit.
And because of the way nature plans her ecosystems, the forest has only ever been able to support a finite number of orangutan.
During the 6-year period when the orangutan is becoming an adolescent, it is learning about the forest, about the dangers, it's learning about the places of food, what kind of food it can eat. And orangutans all learned this, or have to learn this, and if they haven't learned it, they will just die in the forest because it's a hostile environment for them.
But for the past 25 years, the hostility has been coming from outside, invading the jungle, eating the jungle away. For example, the sign says the Kutai National Park. We're actually in the heart of the park. The sign also says no cutting of trees. Well, you can see they've gone. It also says no hunting, no settlement, and the land shouldn't be used for agriculture. See for yourself, there's a banana plantation. "50 years ago, this whole area used to be part of the Kutai rainforest. Today, it may look attractive, undulating green hills, but the environment here is so extremely fragile. To destroy the rainforest is to destroy the orangutan. Before the forest disappeared, this whole area was under the cover of giant trees. Today, this land, this air, this environment is a good 10 degrees hotter than it was 50 years ago. Below this ground, and in fact under most of the remaining rainforest, is a coal seam which in places is so close to the surface that with this increase in temperature, the denuded countryside spontaneously burst into flames, heating the coal just centimetres underground, causing it to burn like this for years. It is destruction like this which is causing grave concern to another group of people who are fighting to save the orangutan. Laurie Perkins is the world stud bookkeeper and works at Zoo Atlanta in Georgia, USA.
Well, being the stud bookkeeper for the orangutans involves keeping track of all of the events in the population worldwide.
The stud book is the starting point for any kind of captive breeding program. While there are those who are fighting to save the orangutan in the wild, there are hundreds of people around the world fighting to ensure that the captive apes are managed properly, so that if disaster strikes the jungle population, the world will never be without these endangered creatures.
Well, what we do in order to ultimately end up with a baby, you start with a genetic analysis of the stud book data, and we go through and we run a series of programs that have been written especially for the management of small populations.
And that is what they have done with this group of orangutans. But despite their efforts and encouragement from the female orangutans, so far he has shown no interest in mating with either of the two females. Is their failure because of the way the animals are housed? There is a huge debate about whether the orangutan is a solitary animal or whether it is a social animal. We know that orangutans generally live a solitary life, coming together only in times of plenty to feed or to mate. But the male orangutan is more solitary than the female, and perhaps this one just wants to spend some time on his own. Perhaps he's just too used to having two females hanging around. Across the other side of the world, at the Perth Zoo in Australia, the orangutans are housed quite differently.
Most animals in zoos are kept in a natural social environment, and but orangutans have been made a exception because they do appear in captivity to increase their sociability, and which they do to some extent. But here at Perth Zoo we believe there's a limit to that sociability, and keeping them in large groups can lead to long-term problems such as long-term stress.
Perth maintains what it calls a natural social system. These animals are housed individually or in groups of 2 or 3. The only time the adult males are housed with the female is when they're mated. And because of this, Perth Zoo has an amazing record. Out of the 902 orangutans in zoos around the world, there are only 5 over the age of 40. 4 of these live in the Perth Zoo. This is Mauis. At 55, she is the oldest orangutan in captivity, possibly the world. This is Puan. At 40, she is about to have her 11th child. And this is Artjay. He has sired 20 offspring. Can the reason be that Perth's amazing success is due to the way they are housed?
This is the rear of the primate house at Perth Zoo. Inside is Puan. She's in labour. And for the first time ever, you're about to witness the birth of one of the world's rarest animals, a baby orangutan.
This is Southern California, but it's not an animal beauty park. It's an operating theatre. The doctors are world-famous heart surgeons. The patient is a little girl orangutan called Karen. She lives at the San Diego Zoo. Karen's short life hasn't been easy. Her mother rejected her at birth, and she was hand-raised. She also has a hole in her heart. Without this life-saving 7-hour operation, she would have died. This is the first and only open-heart surgery performed on an orangutan. The surgeons are using the same process and equipment as if it were open-heart surgery on a human. Inside her chest, her little heart beats furiously.
Probably from, moving around the tree.
Outside, her blood goes through an artificial heart-lung machine, while her own heart is stopped so the patch can be sewn in place.
Now you need to start sort of heading down. Wait a minute, Joe. This is probably pretty, huh?
That's incredible. That works?
The patch in place, her heart is jump-started again. Now the anxious wait. But success.
Okay. I want to breathe up and even go some more. You ready?
And do you need this probe to go back with, or do you have one?
We'll get a different one. If someone can bring the little foam pad, and we'll get it set up on that.
You don't need to warm it.
I'll take it.
Like your 1 or 2 month anniversary off ventilator. Won't that be bitchy?
The little patient, still dopey from the operation, is given her first feed.
A week, 2 weeks after. Just fortified with potassium chloride.
And a special hug from Gail Forland, her keeper.
Her appetite's really good. She's thirsty and she's pretty bright. She's looking around, checking stuff out. The first day she was off the respirator, she was still pretty slow. She's much stronger too. Once in a while when she doesn't like something we're having to do to her, she can put up a pretty good fuss now. She really likes being held. That's like the biggest bonus out of this whole affair for her, I think. It's like a dream come true for her to get held all the time.
Today, Karen lives happily in the San Diego Zoo. And while San Diego only has the odd primate youngster to deal with, the Wilhelmer Zoo in Stuttgart, Germany, has many young primates to care for. It is the primate nursery for the European Endangered Species Breeding Program. Any young primate who's orphaned or rejected by its mother comes here. And of course, the visitors love it. Gundai Sharp is the keeper in charge of the nursery.
The most important thing for this particular species is probably the European Species Survival Plan, which is called the EP, because they try to get unrelated individuals together, so in 100 years of time we're not ending up in having inbred orangutans all over the place.
Stuttgart, like San Diego and Atlanta, is part of the captive breeding management plan, the philosophy of which is partly governed by a complex computer program called Vortex.
No, actually what Vortex says, it's a computer model. So what Vortex says is that if you, based on the known history or the natural history of the animal, if you increase mortality by 1%, the animal will die out within 30 years.
So, how do we begin to save the wild orangutan?
I would say that without the support of the world and without the financial support of the world, the orangutan is absolutely doomed.
Is the plan to reintroduce captive-bred orangutans into the wild?
Now, I believe for a lot of animals that it is a valid and useful way. But for intelligent animals like apes, and perhaps elephants, and several other species, I don't think that is a viable option. Because, as I told you, the spirit is so important, and that spirit is gone. You domesticate an animal, and then it is more or less gone, the spirit. You cannot train that back.
So the captive-bred orangutans, including these at the nursery in Stuttgart, are not to build up stocks for reintroduction. Rather, to maintain the widest possible genetic diversity, so that if orangutans become extinct in the wild, or the wild genetic pool becomes too small, new blood can be introduced from the captive animals. But what good is a strong gene pool if there is no forest left for the orangutans? Believe it or not, the Kutai rainforest has been a protected reserve for more than 50 years. It's just that no one has taken any notice. But all that is about to change.
Well, our project here is a tripartite project between the United Nations Development Program, UNESCO, and Government of Indonesia.
UNESCO is coordinating the logging companies, mining companies, and other industries which surround Kutai. They have agreed to contribute to help pay for the care of what is left of the forest. To help, in mid-1995, the Indonesian government declared what was left of the Kutai couldn't be touched.
Well, Kutai is extremely important, not only to Indonesia, but also to the world, really, because what we have here is a block of the lowland dipterocarp rainforest of Borneo, which is protected, more or less. It needs more protection, but it is protected, legally protected, and this is one of the few chances where we have to save 200,000 hectares, more or less, of this rainforest.
The plan is a major step forward in the battle to save the orangutan's rainforest, but more needs to be done.
In this National Orangutan Survival Program, we invite anybody, the Orangutan Foundation from Taiwan, or IUCN or WWF, or World Society for Protection of Animals, anybody with knowledge and willing to help the cause for the orangutans is free to participate. But it must be an overall program in order to have some hope left for orangutans to survive for next generations to come.
That is why the rehabilitation project at Wannereset is so important. Not only to help these poor creatures who had suffered one way or another at human hands, but for the long-term viability of the species. By releasing these animals back into the jungle, it's hoped the wild population will increase. But there are huge pitfalls and big risks. The people at Wannereset realised that one false move, one mistake, and they could inadvertently cause the extinction of the orangutan.
Now, if you put these rehabilitant orangutans back into a wild population, you run into trouble. And we quickly found out what the troubles are.
You may have heard that the orangutans can suffer all the human diseases that we can suffer. So if we would release one of those disease animals into the wild, we would do unrepairable damage to them.
Because of this, every animal which comes to Wannereset undergoes a strict medical examination and spends time in quarantine. As their rehabilitation progresses, each individual is monitored and checked regularly.
Under the new reintroduction methodology, there are 3 stages: quarantine, socialization, and release. Basically have four pairs of hands, and I really like octopus. And you need 1 technician for each hand, each foot, and the head, minimally. Sometimes more. They're about 4 to 5 times as strong as humans of an equivalent size age. Yeah. Incredibly strong. And combine that with having feet that are like hands, and yeah, human beings are just at a loss, really.
So these animals have to be in the absolute best of health before they are released back into the wild. But there's always the possibility there may be something that may not be picked up, that may have a negative impact on the wild population.
So therefore, the general consensus is that that orangutans that come into the reintroduction centre are to be released in forest that is suitable but does not have a wild population.
Fortunately, in this part of Kalimantan, there are still substantial stands of forest that can be used for reintroduction, that don't have a wild population. It's these areas which Willie Smits, Chris Warren and the team are using to reintroduce these animals back into the wild. And it's these animals they are hoping will save the orangutan from extinction by producing offspring of their own. Meet Charlie. He's about 8 years old. He is one of the success stories of the Wannereset rehabilitation program. His mother was killed by poachers, and he was smuggled to Taiwan, where he was not treated the best. He was eventually confiscated by the authorities and made it back to Wannereset, where after many months, along with another 60 rehabilitated orangutans, was released back into the wild. Charlie is the dominant male in this group. One day he will develop those large flanges on his face, take a mate and produce offspring of his own. He already has a girlfriend.
There's a kind of a ritual interplay between the male and the female. And you see that it's really, it looks like a love affair. It's beautiful. And they sway through the trees and they have fun together. They mate together in a very kind of of loving way, and you can actually see, which I haven't seen in many other animals, that they both enjoy it very much. And you have females that sing during the mating, and that make a lot of noise, and you can see that she is really reaching a climax.
But these two are young and are easily distracted. But it's a good sign that they are happy with their surroundings, and as Charlie and his girl mature, Chris is confident they will produce little ones of their own. Wanaressed is not only the largest rehabilitation station in Indonesia, it is one of the most important, if not the most important, reintroduction project in the world. Wanaressed is so important that the Indonesian government holds it up as a prime example for visiting politicians and bureaucrats. This group are from government conservation departments from all over the world: Germany, Canada, the USA and Australia, to name a few.
Every trade is illegal, and in Indonesia they have been protected since 1925, and only the president himself can give his signature on a permit to have an orangutan. Not even the Minister of Forestry is allowed to give a permit for somebody to have an orangutan, so they're all illegal.
They have come here to see firsthand what is being done to save the wild orangutan.
They're very susceptible to disease, and especially human disease and contagious disease, and it's very important for us to screen them for disease before they go into the large socialization cages where these diseases could be transmitted.
After being given a guided tour of the centre, they are even offered the opportunity to help, to adopt an orangutan.
And minor testing. I'd like to introduce you to little Constance. He's 4 years old, 4 months old, and he just arrived at the station. Now this is the type of case that we see quite commonly. Here at the station there's an adoption program. If any of you would like to contribute to the station, there are a number of ways you can do it. All the cages that you see here have been sponsored by companies, by diplomats.
But there are no takers, and another chance for the orangutan slips away. Realistically, there are only two things which can save the orangutan. The first is female power. It's obvious to say that without female orangutans, the species is doomed. But it is the protection of the female which is the key to the species' survival.
The females are extremely important. So when a female is killed, that territory becomes empty. There will only be males left in that region. And it's very unlikely that a new female will come back to that territory where it has been hunted.
It hangs in the balance because females live only for 37 or 30 or 40 years in the wild. They conceive not before their 15th year. It takes them 6 to 8 years to raise their offspring.
And if you realize that in that period of 20 years, a mother will only raise three babies, it has to invest in them, how to move around the forest, what to eat, where to eat. It must know the complete calendar and the map of a forest before it can survive. So there's 7 to 8 years investment in one baby. Means 3, 1 to replace the mother, 1 to replace the father, and 1 extra just in case one gets sick and dies, or falls out of a tree and dies, or is eaten by a clouded leopard.
Well, as I said, they are the key. The females are the key because of the slow reproductive rate of the species and the fact that the female keeps her dependent infant with her for up to 9 or more years in the wild and only has one at a time. She is therefore the limiting factor. And the males can be going around and fathering lots of babies, but it is the female that's only going to have a few over her entire reproductive lifetime.
So the female orangutan is the critical factor if the species is to survive. And the biggest threat to the female is poachers.
In order to capture a baby orangutan, obviously they're killing the mother, and you've not only lost that mother and that baby, but you've lost the future potential of that mother as well.
You can see how easy it would be to kill this female for her baby. Her greatest defense when she feels threatened is to throw leaves and branches down on her would-be assailant. So what is being done to stop the poachers? Obviously not enough. So what is needed?
You need to have law enforcement, you need to have also extension to tell the people that they're not allowed to do this and that it's going to cause now trouble. Now all these little things, they cost money.
Which brings us to the second thing which will save the orangutan. Ironically, it's the same thing which is going to kill them off.
I think, yeah, it's hard to say who's to blame for this. People are making money out of it, and that's what has been the driving force behind it.
It's money which causes the destruction of the forest and the demise of the orangutan. And it's only money which can reverse this. Wannerasset is one of the most important, if not the most important, rehabilitation project in the world. Yet, it has little or no money.
The current financial position is not very good. If I remember correctly, today we may have money for another 10 days of operation of the station, so there's no buffer whatsoever. So far we have not gotten any significant support of any international organization involved with nature conservation.
The Indonesian government of course supports this project. This is a Ministry of Forest station, but the support needs to go beyond this. To underwrite a project like this involves huge amounts of money, especially with the number of orangutan they are keeping and expecting. There are around another 150 orangutans on the waiting list. Like so many conservation projects around the world, their biggest supporters are school children. Children throughout Indonesia and a few around the world have adopted an orangutan and keep up to date on the progress of their animal on the internet. But children alone can't save the orangutan.
Without the financial support of the world, the orangutan is absolutely doomed. The Indonesian government does what it can, but it needs a little bit of pushing power. It needs a little bit of extra financial support to overcome the problems of the different interests that also are with the forest, that also are with the land on which that forest grows. And if they feel supported, if the Indonesian government feels supported by the rest of the world, that this is something that we should keep on the world, they can do it, and they are all too happy to have advisors, to have people from all over the world helping them to do this. The orangutan is the species that shows that we are not alone. It is the species that shows that we have a history, that we have a shared history. The orangutan is part of me, as much as I'm part of the orangutan. We have the same brain, we have the same blood, we have the same body, we have the same behavior. It may show a little bit different here and there because I look different as it does. We have very similar potentials. It lives in an environment that science has now found out is tremendously important for the world. So the orangutan itself is important for this world because it shows us that this is our history. This is something that the world is about.
the whole point of managing the animals in captivity is to supplement conservation in the wild. I want them to exist in the wild. I don't just want them to be in captivity. I don't want to have to fall back on this.
So the experts say it's important for humanity to realize that what is happening to the orangutan is actually happening to us. The orangutan situation is a microcosm of what is happening to humanity. Because of human greed, the rainforests, the world's natural air conditioning, are being destroyed. This must ultimately affect us. We must understand that the orangutan is in fact a reflection of our own situation, and that if we allow the orangutan to become extinct, then we are allowing ourselves to travel down the same path. The experts say, be warned. If the orangutan succumbs to extinction, then the warning sirens will be screaming for humanity. If they are just hanging on, then so are we.